Okay, so let's continue with our next video in our practice questions of AWS Certified Developer Associate Exam. So let's read the question number 61. A developer is it deploying an application that will store files in an Amazon S3 bucket. So what application will do? That is just going to store some file into S3 bucket. The file must be encrypted at rest. At rest means like when the file will be in the S3 bucket, when the files are resting in the S3 bucket, at that time file must be encrypted. The developer wants to automatically replicate the files to an S3 bucket in a different AWS region. And along with that, what developer wants is as soon as it lands into S3 bucket, it should replicate to some another S3 bucket in different region for disaster recovery. Just in case if one S3 bucket get corrupted, we have the data in another AWS region. How can the developer accomplish this task with the least amount of configuration? So we need to perform two tasks. One, encryption. Second, the replication. So encrypt the file using server-side encryption with S3 encryption keys and enable S3 bucket replication. So this looks correct because we need to use the least amount of configuration. So when we create a bucket, there is a default setting, encrypt with the default server key, because S3 bucket as at the server end, and we have the some encryption keys there already, so you don't need to create the key. Along with that, you can enable this bucket replication parameter. Encrypt the files using server-side encryption with an AWS key management service customer key. So no, if you are going to create a customer key, then you need to manage that. So but the question is the least amount of configuration. Use S3 sync command to sync the files. No. Configure an S3 lifecycle configuration to automatically transfer. That is okay, but what about the encryption? So A is the correct answer. So question number 62. A serverless application is using AWS step functions to process data and save it to a database. So there is a one application which is going to process the data and save database. The application needs to validate some data with an external service before. So there is some application, right? It is trying to save the data into the database, but before saving the data into the database, it will go to some external service. Maybe it will call some API and validate the data. If the data validation has been done, then it's going to store the data into the database. The application will call the external service from an AWS Lambda function. So this external service is being called from the AWS Lambda function, and the external service will take a few hours. So let's suppose you have the Lambda function, and in that Lambda function you have a function called like and basically you are calling the external service, right? So but external service taking few hours to validate. The external service respond to a webhook when the validation is complete. But if you notice, our maximum time of Lambda function is 15 minutes. And within the Lambda function, if you are calling some another service and that service itself is taking few hours, then the Lambda function is going to fail, right? So a developer need to pass the step function workflow and wait for the response from the external service. So how should the developer manage this scenario? Because he want to use the Lambda function, he don't want to abort the Lambda function. Also, he want the response from the external service, and as soon as he want the response from the external service, he want to process further in the step function. So what he should do, use the dot wait for task token option in the Lambda function task state, pass the token in the body. Use the dot wait for task token option in the Lambda function task state, pass the invocation request. Call the Lambda function in synchronous mode. So this is totally wrong, because if you call the in synchronous mode na, which means until unless it is not getting the response, the Lambda function will not finish, but you will get the response after 1 hour or after a couple of hours. But by that time, Lambda function is getting timeout. So C is totally wrong. Call the Lambda function is asynchronous mode. Use the wait state until the external service completes is the processing. Asynchronous mode is okay, But they said use the wait state uh, for the external services. So wait state in the step function. So it is going to wait for the external service to be processed. So looks correct, but ideally wrong, because when you use the wait function, there is some time, I think some minute, or I think 60 minute. It definitely, it's not, it can't be wait for few hours. So C can't be those. So either one or two, because it don't wait for task token. Uh, because what it will do is, uh, you could see it is going to respond with the validation to complete. So it is going to return a token as soon as the external service is going to complete, and then the token is going to be passed or further in the body, and then the step function is going to be triggered. So A looks correct to me. Yeah. So if you go to here, you could see the wait step function is designed for predefined uh, fixed delay, like later as an example for X seconds. It can't pass indefinitely or some external event occur. So D can be eliminated, and wait for task token could be the correct approach. A developer must use AWS X-Ray to monitor an application that running on EC2. So you have EC2 instance, within the EC2 some application is running, and developer must use X-Ray to monitor your application. So why we use X-Ray? To check the performance. The developer has prepared the application by using the X-Ray SDK. All right. What should the developer do performing the monitoring? So you could see within the EC2 application is running, and developer already write the code using X-Ray SDK, basically because we want to observe the performance of an application. So some X-ray utility needs to be used. Okay, get the performance metric, something like that. But X-ray is some different service, and you want to monitor to perform the monitoring on some another service. So EC2 should send logs to that service. So there should be some connection between one service, that is EC2, and the another service X-ray. All right. So what should we do? Configure an X-ray SDK sampling rule and target. Totally wrong. Sampling rule is just to, like, if you want to filter something, install the X-ray daemon, assign an IAM role in the EC2 instance with a policy that allow writes to X-ray. Definitely we need an IAM role for the EC2 instance which is going to write to the X-ray, which give access to the right things to the X-ray. Install the X-ray daemon. Looks correct, because we need to install the daemon into the EC2 instance. Install the X-ray daemon, configure it to forward data to event bridge. No, wrong. Deploy the X-ray SDK with the application. XDK already there. So B looks correct. Question number 64. A developer is designing a full stack serverless application. Okay. File for the website are stored in an Amazon S3 bucket. AWS Lambda function that use Amazon API gateway endpoint return results from an Amazon DynamoDB table. Okay, so you have the API gateway, and after the API gateway, you have the Lambda, and so AWS Lambda function that use Amazon API gateway returns result. So and then you have the DynamoDB table. So Lambda function is running something from the DynamoDB table, and it is getting returned. The developer must create a solution that securely provide registration. So there is a website, right? So developer needs to provide a registration so that the user can register, user can authenticate for the application while minimizing the amount of configuration. So whenever you could see na authentication, something like that. So there should be one AWS service, that is the Amazon Cognito, that should immediately come into your mind. So create an Amazon Cognito user pool and app client. Configure the app client to use the user pool and provide the hosted web UI, which is going to provide the sign up and sign in option. So this looks correct, because Amazon Cognito is for the authentication, some kind of thing, and they said you need to provide a registration page. So Cognito service, I think I already done one hands-on practical in one of the video. So where we see the we in the vision within the Amazon Cognito, you can host your web UI, and where the person can or user can do the sign up and then sign in. So A looks correct. Configure and manage identity will map the user with the IAM row that are configured to the S3 bucket that stores the website. No. Configure and launch into Amazon EC2. No. Why should you launch into Amazon EC2? Create an IAM policy that allow access to the website. That is fine, but what about the registration? So A looks correct. Question number 66. A company has a website that writes file to an Amazon S3 bucket. Whenever there is a new file, an S3 notification event occurs in a Lambda function to process the file. The Lambda function work as expected. So there is an S3 bucket, there is a Lambda. As soon as the file landing into the S3 bucket, the Lambda is getting triggered and the Lambda is working fine. However, when a developer checks the Lambda function logs, the developer finds the multiple invocation. So let's suppose only one file has been loaded right into the S3 bucket, and Lambda function totally work fine. But when the developer check the CloudWatch log, they could see many invocation. It looked like Lambda invoked multiple times. Why is there duplicate entries? The S3 bucket name is incorrectly specified, totally wrong, because Lambda function is working as expected. Lambda function did not run correctly, totally wrong, because Lambda function worked correctly. Amazon S3 is delivering the same event multiple times. That could be the correct answer, because Lambda is triggering multiple times. So it means same event is coming multiple times. The application stopped immediately. Totally wrong. So C looks correct. Here they said B, but as per me, the answer is C. Even if you go to the discussion tab, some people say B, but most of the people say C, 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 C. So that's why I go with C. Question number 66. A developer needs to use the AWS CLI, okay, on premise, like on maybe local computer, whatever it is, on premise. Developer have to temporarily access some AWS service, right? The developer needs to authenticate AWS. So whenever you're trying to log in from your local computer to AWS, uh, you need to configure the AWS CLI and set some tokens or some security access key, right? But what is the most secure way? Uh, right? What is the most secure way? Specify the developer IAM access key, secret key for each CLI command. Totally wrong. So let's suppose you are running 10 CLI commands. So within the 10 CLI command, if you are going to pass key and the password as a parameter in each CLI command, that is wrong. You are unnecessary hard coding or typing every time in the CLI command. Basically, in every command, you are passing those parameters. That is not a secure way. Run the AWS configure CLI command, provide the developer IAM uh, access key and the secret access key. So that looks correct, because that is the normal way which we do. But if you read the question, they said the developer need to authenticate the AWS service with their identity for several hours, not for the lifetime or for the whole day or for like couple of days. But if you hard code into your configuration, like when you do AWS configure command, it is going to uh, set your access key ID, secret key ID in the config file, and that will stay there for I think couple of hours or days. But we want only for several hours. That it means we should temporarily access. Specify the developer IAM profile wrong. Run the get session token. This looks correct. So session token is command for the STS. STS is basically used to get the temporary credentials for a particular user. Alright, so instead of hard coding the credential, we will get these credentials only for the temporary basis. So D is the correct answer. Question number 66, sorry, 67. An AWS Lambda function access two Amazon DynamoDB table. Okay, one Lambda function is accessing two DynamoDB table. The developer wants to improve the performance of the Lambda function by identifying bottlenecks. So whenever you could see the performance, one service should come into your mind, that is X-ray. So developer want to improve the performance of the Lambda function by identifying the bottlenecks. How can the developer inspect? Add a DynamoDB as an event source to the Lambda function. View the performance into the CloudWatch metrics. No. Add a load balancer in front of a DynamoDB table. No. Limit Lambda to no more than concurrent invocation, no. Enable X-ray tracing with the, so definitely correct, X-ray. Question number 68. A developer deployed an application to an Amazon EC2. The developer application needs to know the public IP address. So your application is running on EC2 and your application wants to know the IP address. So how should you know? So we know we have the metadata URL. Alright, if you run this URL using curl command, then you will get metadata information of the particular EC2 instance, and in that metadata information you can get the public IP as well. So query the instance metadata, which looks correct. Query the instance user data. So this is not a this for the user data only. I'm not sure whether this URL actually exists or not, but metadata is the correct one. Query the AMI wrong. Click the host file of the operating system. So A looks correct. Question number 69. The developer is designing an AWS Lambda function to perform a maintenance activity. Okay, so developer is designing AWS Lambda function. The developer will use event bridge to invoke the function hourly. So Lambda function that is going to run on hourly basis. The developer wants the function to log information at different levels of details according to the value of log level. So let's suppose you have the lambda function, and in within the lambda function you write something called logging.info, logging.warning, logging.error, right? So the developer wants log information at different levels. So level means maybe info level, debug level, warning level, error level, but based upon the log level variable. Okay. The developer must design the function so that the log level can be set without requiring a change to the function code. So one option is you can hard code the log level. Maybe let's suppose first you set the log level as a debug within the code, and then do your testing. Then maybe developer wants to test with the log level as error, then you can change the code. But the question said you should not change the code. What is the next approach? So the next approach is set this log level variable at the environment variable, and the developer is going to access that environment variable, and you can easily update the environment variable, and it is not going to impact your lambda code. Add a custom log level parameter to the lambda function. No. Set the log level in environment variable. Looks correct. Set the log level in CloudWatch log console. No. Add a custom. No. So B looks correct. Question number 70. A developer is creating a serverless application that uses AWS Lambda function. The developer will use AWS CloudFormation to deploy the application. So you have the Lambda function, and the Lambda function is getting deployed using CloudFormation. The application will write logs to the CloudWatch logs, which is okay because Lambda always write the logs to the CloudWatch logs. The developer has created a log group in a CloudFormation, because we are like creating a Lambda function using the CloudFormation. So, and when the Lambda is going to run, it writes the logs to some CloudWatch log group. But you can configure the CloudWatch log group as well. How your CloudWatch log group looks like. The developer has created a log group in a CloudFormation template for the application to use. So developer want my application should write the CloudWatch logs in a particular log group. So that log group also getting created using CloudFormation template. The developers need to modify the CloudFormation template to make the name of the log group variable to the application at runtime. Okay. So what we need to modify? CloudFormation template. Within the CloudFormation template, the log group is creating. So as soon as the log group is getting created, we need to refer it within the application. Application means the Lambda. But which solution? Use AWS include transform to provide the log group name to the application? No. Pass the log group name to the application in the user data section. What is the user data? User data is for EC2 wrong. Use the CloudFormation template mapping section to specify the log group name of the application. Looks correct. Pass the log group ARN as an environment variable to the Lambda function. D also look correct. So D looks correct to me. They mention like pass the log group ARN. So as soon as the log group has been created, so whatever the ARN will be available dynamically, like maybe there is this function called get log group ARN, and then we need to pass into the lambda function. Lambda function means within the cloud formation template, because lambda function is getting deployed using cloud formation. So within the cloud formation template, you have the parameter. So answer is D. So let me show you. So if you go here like this, so this is the cloud formation template. You are creating resources. In the resource, you are getting a log group, and when you mention log group, okay, I am going to create a log group using this name. And now this is, and you are also going to create a lambda function using cloud formation. And when you like reference a lambda function, you can mention the log group as well in the environment variable. So, and now because the log group is getting created here, so how you know by which name it is going to create here? So you can like just grab that uh, my log group, and whatever the ARN will be created and get attribute. So you can get the attribute. So the correct answer is pass the log group as an environment variable. Why not mapping? Use the crowd formation dominant mapping section. Mapping is just like key value pair. Okay, let's suppose when you are deploying the crowd formation, so it has to use some kind of settings. Then you can use the mapping. Even though I think I have mentioned somewhere. Yeah, the mapping section in the crowd formation used to define key value for static configuration, but it is not for the dynamic. Uh, but in our case, it is dynamic because it is going to create at runtime, right? So this is the correct answer. So that's it. That's the end of the video. And in the coming video, we are going to cover next 10 question. Thank you.